We'll have the privilege of hearing from Results Positive founder and senior solutions architect, Mr. John Ferner, a more than 20-year veteran of the IT service industry. He'll be discussing common SPM roadmaps, including demand optimization, quality controls, and some data-driven reporting options that are also available. And with that, we'll go ahead and turn the time over to John.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks again, everyone, for joining our webinar today. And for our webinar today, we're definitely going to focus in on SPM implementation best practices. And in terms of our overall agenda, we're going to review those best practices. We're going to review some of the most common starting points for individuals implementing SPM, as well as provide some roadmap examples. We'll then highlight some keys to success for a couple of those starting points around resource management and reporting. We'll also then provide you with some roadmaps for post-initial implementation. We get a lot of questions where customers are saying, hey, I just implemented, now what do I do next? And so we've highlighted some roadmaps in that use case. Following that, we will have question and answers. As Sean mentioned, if you have questions throughout, feel free to put those in chat and we will address those appropriately. So thanks again for joining us in our session today. Those of you that don't know Results Positive, we really focus in on helping customers optimize the investment in their software decisions, i.e. ServiceNow, i.e. strategic portfolio management, app portfolio management, which is now called enterprise architecture, as well as focusing in here on analytics and reporting. And so we specialize in these areas in helping organizations be able to take advantage of best practices, more out-of-the-box type solutions, at the same time with the reporting needed to make better decisions, helping you then basically achieve the outcomes you're looking for with your software investments. In terms of our overall offerings, assessments, and roadmaps, so you'll highlight here some of that expertise here around the roadmaps and best practice implementations we'll talk about. We do a lot of advisory and implementation work, whether that just be overall implementation of the solution, the process areas, or implementing our report portals or custom portals. And then we have our managed services. So we do a lot of managed services support for organizations, as well as our reporting solutions as well. They're very well received and being used by primarily all of our customers. So what we're going to jump into here is SPM implementation best practices. And so a couple of key points that I wanted to highlight here. First, it's best to first establish goals and objectives, then kind of assess where you are today, put together an overall blueprint from a solution perspective, and then establish a roadmap. One thing that's really critical here is the phased implementation approach. And that's because SPM is an area where it's large organizational change efforts are needed. So if you've ever attended any customer's session when they talk about implementation, typically always a lesson learned is make sure that you focus more on organizational change and implement things from a phased perspective. So that's kind of built into our overall approach. A couple of things here that I'll highlight and I'll include probably on the next slide as well. So not only have these phases, but then make sure that you have organizational change, dashboards and reporting and education throughout, besides the core blocking and tackling of the actual process and solution areas. We always typically say if there's one thing that you can focus on for adoption, that would be dashboards and reporting. So if you can get your executives to view the information in the system and the organization knows when they're viewing that information, then it's amazing how the adoption will be there because they want to make sure that all their data is there and being visible to the executives. So the outcome here of that phased approach, using those best practices around organizational change management, can help you have, with that ultimately adoption and sustainability. That's really the core output that we're looking for organizations. But from a business perspective, right, that's going to help you accelerate time to market. It's going to help you increase the overall business outcomes you're looking for your organization. And so this phased approach is really critical to circumvent challenges with organizational change. We have our implementation critical success factors here over the last 20 years implementing SPM systems here and the associated processes. So number one, definitely want to start off with goals and objectives. We'll show some examples of that here in our webinar today. Number two is really key. Focus on the core foundational product. Don't over automate, don't over configure or even customize. So focus on the core 20% that's going to give you 80% of the value. And so that's really key. As an example, a lot of times we'll get called into organizations that we didn't help them with their initial implementation. And so at that particular time, now they have something that's been over configured, too complex. People are pushing back. And so then we come in and help with the simplification effort there. So our guidance there is don't do that over configuration or customization up front. Number three, number four, it's really important to have metrics, both to help with that adoption so that executives as well as all roles in the organization can use the system, but also to start tracking those metrics and then baseline metrics over time. So that's a really key component. And then 5 and 6 are some items around organizational change. Definitely training communications is key. Role-based forums, we see that's really effective. So if you're rolling out project management, if you have a project manager community of practice or a forum that meets once a month, that would be good to continue. Include them in updates of the new solution, the new process, the new reporting capabilities, so they start understanding that before it's going to be rolled out. They can also then be a good forum for testing and validation. They can be also a good forum then for ongoing continuous improvement. So a key component there for adoption. And then a number 6 here for leadership reinforcement. So we believe that sponsorship is not good enough. You need to have the reinforcement. And the best way to do that is make sure that executives or steering committees, governance committees are using the system to make those decisions, encouraging them and really kind of ensuring that the organization's putting the data in so that they can use the system for those decision-making and governance decisions. So these are what we found as the critical success factors with your implementation. Next here is kind of building upon that a little bit here from an organizational change perspective. And so obviously you want to put together an overall organizational change program and do all the standard blocking and tackling from an organizational change perspective. Make sure that you have engagement with your leadership. Make sure you understand the readiness of the organization for change, understand where they are in the process. The dashboards and reporting, as we mentioned before, we feel that's a key differentiator here. That's going to help drive and cement your adoption. Obviously, communication and training as well. And then just being able to understand that you're going to have these change journey responses of awareness, resistance, acceptance, and adoption. And so you're going to go through that process with every phase that you roll out. And so it's important to understand that. And that's why it's important to have some of those change champion focus groups or those community of practice that I mentioned earlier. Get them involved early up front and throughout the process and ongoing continuous improvement so that they are kind of committed to the organization, but also committed to your solutions. And then they can be a big champion, help guide your future roadmaps as well. Ultimately then giving you the outcomes that we typically like to see, that buy-in and adoption, better decisions now, you have more accurate data, and really gonna make sure your investments are gonna drive the attainment of business goals and objectives. So next I wanna talk about common starting points for SPM implementations. And so here we see this evolving a little bit over the years, but one key area we typically see that a lot of organizations will start with will be demand management. And so they want to start getting traction and visibility into their recommended and proposed projects. And so they want to start capturing that. They want to get some high level estimates, what it's going to take there. And so they want to come in and start setting up that intake process. This is an area that typically organizations can easily over-configure and make it too complex. So you definitely want to keep focusing on keeping it simple, and you can obviously add to and enhance and mature your process over time. But a key intake process to make sure we understand what's being requested, and then we can determine on getting that approved. Another key area for a starting point is project management. Most organizations say if they're new, starting with ServiceNow, they're probably already managing projects today. So that's a common starting point, just saying, okay, we're managing projects today. Let's take those projects, let's migrate those over to ServiceNow, and let's just focus on continuing to do project management. Maybe we'll enhance that by doing hybrid project management. Maybe we'll look at managing our project controls with risks and issues, decisions, actions, and change requests. But then they can kind of start there and then migrate into other capabilities over time. We do see organizations focusing on resource management, and we see that for organizations that are implementing SPM initially or from a post initial implementation perspective. It's a key area. It's an area that everyone wants to get their hands on. It is a large organizational change area as well. It's not necessarily a tool area, but it does impact and touch all different dimensions of the solution, demands and projects, can even do in your epics from a hybrid perspective, even to your strategic planning and portfolio planning as well. We'll talk more about some of the keys to resource management. That's been a critical area that customers are adopting and trying to adopt today. The fourth one here, basically kind of think about it as trying to implement the majority of the capabilities here, project, resource, time. So we're really kind of doing the core there. And so we see that kind of more as a little bit of a big bang, but we see that definitely common. And we're seeing more and more of this last one here around strategic planning. With the new capabilities around strategic planning, it's a great opportunity to implement that for your strategic planning office in the organization. So it doesn't have to be IT related or even business unit related. It can be your overall strategic planning for the organization. Most organizations, especially in healthcare, we've noticed they have strategic plans. And so this allows you to be able to create those, manage those, distribute those, similarly like you would today in PDF or PowerPoint, but now it's actually in the system. So you can then follow up and start layering in portfolio management, project management, demand management. But you can just start doing your strategic planning, your high-level initiatives and programs, not really doing execution work, but just high-level managing your plans, your goals, and your objectives. So those are what we see as the common starting points today. And I'll be jumping here into examples as we go through. So first thing you probably saw in our implementation approach from a best practice perspective is really identifying and confirming goals and objectives. And so the goals and objectives will vary based upon customer, based upon where you are today in your overall journey. And so it's important to kind of assess where you're at. If you're just looking to go into ServiceNow, or even if you've done initial implementation. So really start identifying kind of your strategic priorities, putting this in terminology that what's in ServiceNow. Then over here, we can put in our overall goals or OKRs if you set up the goal framework to align to OKRs. So once we identify those, then we want to identify what are the outcomes that we're looking for. This can help then drive the scope. It can help then drive the overall roadmap to meet those outcomes based on your strategic priorities and your goals. Here again, your strategic priorities and goals can change over time. So you want to kind of reassess on an annual basis with your overall roadmap. But definitely recommend starting here so that all of your implementation efforts can be tied to outcomes that are going to benefit the organization. Next, we also talked about having a blueprint, the importance of having an overall blueprint. It's a great way to start that communication out to the organization. Obviously, it's more of your end state blueprint as part of your roadmap, but it's an opportunity to communicate that out to the organization. So here's a common blueprint. Here's doing the demand intake perspective. Here, then it's moving into kind of the more strategic planning. when that demand comes in, doing some high-level prioritization, scoring, ranking, some high-level estimates. From there, right, you can go into overall roadmap planning, looking at dependencies there. Then you could start looking at capacity planning, depending on whether or not you're doing resource management, create your project, and then manage your project execution. Obviously, you could do this from a hybrid perspective as well. In this view here, we're looking at it more traditional, but we're seeing more and more using hybrid as well as enterprise agile planning. So definitely we would want to put together an overall blueprint, and then you can identify which capabilities and solutions and processes you'll be implementing as part of your journey. So next, what I wanted to provide is some examples of those roadmaps from those starting points. And so here I have an example of a demand management overall roadmap. So basically setting up that intake process, and here we're kind of recommending having some of that initial resource forecasting capabilities. So putting in those resource assignments, those resource plans, so you have those estimates. So not only do you have that proposed project coming in, but you have an idea of what the estimated resource needs are. For organizations that are focusing on the financials, right, a lot of times we'll include that on phase one. Here we have some of the financials coming in a little bit later, but just to kind of give you an idea of how that would flow. So basically at a high level in this roadmap, we've got demand management or forecasting, then doing project management, high level task management, then moving into more portfolio management, moving into kind of end-to-end resource management with time management. And then phase four, going into more advanced scoring and surveys related to that intake process, looking at lessons learned, project closeout reports. Those are some great solutions that we've implemented for customers. Looking at overall financial actuals so that your project managers can see that flow in to the system versus going to two different applications, and the ongoing advanced dashboards and reporting. So that's an example of a roadmap for demand management. And a lot of times we get questions, so what's the timeline and duration for that? Typically, what we say is it's kind of like three months time frame here to go through the process, define it, configure it, and then deploy that out to the organization. You can have a stabilization period on that set of capabilities. During that stabilization period, you could still then start planning and preparing for your next phase. This could be another 3-month phase here, followed by a stabilization period. Here again, it doesn't necessarily always kind of fit within the 3 months for each phase. Definitely varies based on the size of the organization and just the overall scope. But for a medium-sized organization, focused on keeping it simple, focused on keeping it core, foundational, more out of the box. Definitely easy to do that in that 3-month cycle that I just described. So next here we have project management. So basically starting with project management first. So basically here we have project management of the first phase. Here we're highlighting, say, agile hybrid as appropriate. Phase 2 is then bringing in the actual demand capabilities, bringing in some of your project controls, bringing in more detailed project financials here in phase 2. Phase 3, then moving into the portfolio planning, then looking at resource management and time management. And then phase 4, similar to the previous one for demand management, all kind of ending in the same place in terms of your roadmap, getting that visibility into actuals, as well as continual advancements in dashboards and reports. So just kind of different starting point, automatically getting to the same end state based upon the readiness and the maturity of the organization. Next, I have one here from a resource management roadmap perspective. And this one's kind of looking at resource management from just the ground level. So say resource management, ultimately you want to make sure you identify your goal, your groups, your roles and your skills, understand what inventory you have in the organization. You might do resource development activities. So these are kind of things outside of the system that you would do. Here again, organizations might already have resource career development. They already know the roles and such, so they could, come over here into phase two. Phase two here, we're looking at a lot of the governance processes. So resource scheduling and governance processes need to be defined. Your ongoing project and operational capacity planning processes there. So that's kind of, you got project work, non-project work. Then down here, we're looking at non-project work and identifying what those operational buckets would be and allocating resources to that so that we can have a net understanding of what our project capacity is. And so basically these first two phases in this roadmap would be setting up your infrastructure and foundation, if you will, outside of the system. Or phase two could include some of the operational resource assignments, operational resource plans here in phase two. So that could be in the system. And then over here in phase three, more of an accelerated process than we saw on the previous two roadmaps. Here we're bringing in demand management and project management, bringing in time, and then even bringing in some of the portfolio planning, and then getting us to the same kind of state here from a phase four perspective that we saw on the previous roadmaps. So just kind of a different starting point here, ultimately still getting to the same end game based upon that readiness of the organization and maturity. I did want to talk a little bit about resource management. It is a very large change initiative, and so wanted to kind of share with you some of our keys to success for resource management implementation. And so if we look at it here, it definitely requires capacity and commitment, requires communication, just like what you're doing today. Just because you're going to have a system that's going to capture all of that, you still need to communicate. Governance is going to be key. It's going to require most likely changes to your governance process. And then it is a large organizational change initiative, so that's going to be key as well. So if you look at capacity and commitment, highlighting here that really, like resource managers, right, they need to have the capacity, commitment, and spend the time doing planning and allocating of resources. Project managers, right, they'll need to communicate their project resource assignment plans with resource managers. That could be the upfront request to understand that what the estimate would be, as well as then talking to the resource managers to get resources allocated. And the managers need to have the capacity to perform those activities. I'll highlight the next slide here, kind of the core activities that everyone would do in resource management. So just make sure everyone's aware of that. And the reason for that, and the reason we have kind of the keys here, is resource management. A lot of times it's more difficult to implement than other areas, not necessarily from a tool perspective, but from an organizational change perspective. And so that's why we're kind of walking through these keys. Communication is key, right? So, and it's really all about communication. If you're not doing resource management solution implementation today, right, you're doing a lot of communication. Well, that communication should continue. So PMs, project managers should continue to communicate about assigning and creating estimates. Resource managers need to communicate about their decisions they're making around allocations, or if they need to pause someone's allocation and replace them with someone else. So all that needs to continue to occur. From a governance perspective, we see a lot of organizations where their governance is all based upon financials, or it's based upon schedule, or it's based upon alignment to goals, which are all great attributes you should be looking at as you're making your prioritization and approval decisions. But a lot of organizations aren't factoring in capacity. We see a lot where they just say yes to all those things, that we put them on a prioritized list, and then we try to tackle those in an early fashion, or tackle those based upon which constituent in our organization is voicing the loudest need. But basically what we really want to get to is including resource capacity as part of those governance decisions. And so that we're not green lighting those projects only if we have capacity. And so basically what that's going to drive then is, we're not going to approve things. We're not going to have a queue of projects unless we have resources. Ultimately, then you're going to increase the throughput. You might have less projects currently in the hopper that you're working on, but you're going to increase the throughput. Or you're going to maybe also still have the same number, but maybe you have different sourcing channels versus just internal resources, so you can get the same amount done. And that's really a function of providing the right visibility. If you can provide the visibility on what the resource needs are, that way you can deliver your roadmap and don't get to the end of the year and oh, we weren't able to accomplish things because we didn't have that capacity. We need to factor that capacity into those upfront governance decisions. And then just ongoing organizational change. You know, they're going to have natural to have objections to doing resource management. Everyone feels it's a silver bullet, but everyone gets frustrated about what it takes to maintain. So what I typically say, setting things up day one, simple to do, but day two is where you have a lot of maintaining activities. And so those activities range from, I got 5 projects on hold. I have 5 projects that need to be extended out. We have 5 new projects. So I need to update all of our staffing assignments and plans and allocations for each one of those projects. That's a lot of maintaining that we need to do. And so that's why it's so important to focus on the organizational change. And what we've also found, just from a overall capacity to perform resource management, is most successful organizations, I'm not saying you have to do it, but most successful organizations have a centralized resource management process and support specialists. And so those individuals are working with resource managers and project managers to help with those maintenance activities to make sure that resource estimates are accurate and up to date. And so that really can take some of that burden off the team so they can focus on delivery, focus on managing their teams. And so we found that as a key to success. One other thing that I would talk about key to success here is around expectations. I didn't include that here based on time we have in our session today. We have a whole slide around expectations. And one key thing around expectations for resource management that you should adopt is that we're not trying to be perfect with our resource estimates or with our resource allocations, right? 80%, 90% accurate needs to be sufficient for the organization. And that way you're going to eliminate some of the objections. You're going to avoid unnecessary maintenance activities because you want to get it perfect. You know, we've always had the question, well, if someone's going to leave for a day or two, do I need to update my resource plans and resource estimates? We recommend not doing that. Keep it that 80, 90% accurate enough so you can make the proper decisions, but not overburden the organization. So setting the expectations on the accuracy threshold we found is really key. And that'll help with your adoption. Next here, we just have an overall chart here. Definitely can vary based on organization, but we see these are the major activities. We see the different roles here that are associated. And so the project manager, the resource manager role is prominent here. And so that's what we mentioned up front. That commitment and that capacity is critical here to be able to support these activities. And that's why a lot of times we'll see the kind of the resource manager support team, 1 or 2 individuals or more, supporting resource managers and project managers to keep everything up to date so that we can be better in our decision making. And next here, we talked a little bit about governance. So governance being really critical here for adoption. So we've seen organizations create resource management governance model just from a resource scheduling and staffing perspective. So this is one way of looking at that type of a governance model here. And so that's really key. And obviously here, right, you've got different types of resources, internal resources, contractual resources, or even vendors. And so having a good model there is important. But ultimately, like we said, it's best if you can incorporate resource capacity decisions as part of your overall strategic investment steering committees or your ongoing governance boards and committees, incorporating that in with the standard, looking at things from an overall cost perspective, resource perspective, or even schedule perspective. So it's best to have that all kind of combined together throughout your organization when it comes from a governance model perspective. So putting together an overall governance model is really key. What we found here is really important to understand kind of what their major functions are that can kind of relate to what areas of the solution that they're monitoring and using. So found that to be very effective. Obviously, this is just a high level. There's a lot more detail that you would establish for your overall governance. So next here, I have a couple of slides just on resource management. Like we said, that can be challenging. So you can focus here just on the initial setup of from an operational perspective, doing your forecasting, doing your projects, then doing end-to-end resource management. So that's kind of the flow there. Catching myself up here. So next I want to move to the strategic planning roadmap example. So this is one of those common starting points as well. It's rather new based upon the new capabilities within ServiceNow, but definitely a key area. So here we're looking at phase one, where you can start creating and managing strategic plans, setting up a goals framework here, as well as then creating those strategic plans with initiatives and roadmaps. Like I mentioned earlier, right, this could be done just with the strategic planning office in the organization. It doesn't have to be in IT, doesn't have to be in a business unit, or this could be a strategic planning, for the EPMO as an example. So they're not really getting into execution. We're just identifying our high-level strategic plan, focused on our goals and our priorities, and then what our high-level initiatives are. And then you can communicate that out to the organization, and they could be doing execution in ServiceNow as an example, or they could be doing it in another system until they bring it into ServiceNow. So that's a key starting point. Next here, if that was your starting point, then phase two, we can look at those goals and targets and start getting in, actually adding in the targets. So the targets are really your KPIs that you would set up. So if we have a goal to improve customer satisfaction, then we would have a target there, improve customer satisfaction by 10%, or achieve 95% of our customer satisfaction. So that's how you can translate setting up targets or the OKRs. The initiatives themselves, you might want to start talking some progress tracking. Here you can do that just a very high level, not really focused on all of the execution, that pulling the different departments or groups in the organization wants the progress of those initiatives, or by getting visibility into the execution tools that you have at the time to track that. And then here highlighting that you might want to do another business unit or department strategic planning pilot. So kind of do a phase one for a different department as an example. Then phase three here, then start looking at plan versus actuals on your goals and targets. Really then start putting in some strategic program roadmaps, and even do it from a hybrid perspective with your demands, projects, and epics. Start looking at what if scenario planning, potentially do another overall strategic planning pilot. And then if you don't have the core components within ServiceNow, then you can move into implementing demand, project, resource management capabilities, as well as another pilot of strategic planning for a different business unit or department. So just an example here, using that as a starting point. Here's just another example of that governance model. Definitely want to have that set up to support what you're doing from a strategic planning perspective. Next, I want to just highlight for those of you that might not be aware of strategic planning workspace. So doing that strategic planning as a starting point gives you that ability to come in here and have an overall view of your initiatives. It's typically what we see if you're just doing that high level strategic planning. And then you can rank those there. You can score those initiatives as well. So there's some good capabilities here within the strategic planning workspace. Also, then you can put together the high level roadmap. The really key that we see here with these roadmaps is putting in your dependencies. So you could look at your different initiatives, right? If you're in that strategic planning office, you go communicate to the different business units, and you can start understanding dependencies. You can document those here, communicate that out, update the roadmap as needed to make sure that those dependencies don't have any conflicts. Then ultimately here, we can look at it from overall capacity planning. Obviously, this assumes that you've entered in resource management. Typically, we don't see this for the strategic planning offices starting out using this capability, but definitely something you can do over time as the organization adopts resource management and managing project execution as well. So next, I wanted to highlight a little bit when it comes to reporting. As we mentioned earlier, reporting is a key critical area we've seen that really accelerates adoption of the solutions and helps circumvent issues with organizational change. So when we look at things from an overall reporting perspective, we see a need for stakeholder reports and visibility. And so we as Results Positive created various portals there and give that visibility. It doesn't require a license. You can provide that visibility across the organization. And just providing that visibility can help with decision making, can help reduce burdens when it comes to resource management or just overall collisions, if you will, on projects. And then here using the out-of-the-box capabilities, the PMO dashboard for project delivery, some of the data quality, also then using the strategic planning and portfolio planning capabilities for roadmaps, overall resource capacity, great capabilities there. And then just your ongoing daily operations here, setting up the appropriate analytics, the team member dashboards, they have one place to go to get their work. There's some new capabilities coming out with the collaborative work management that you can see all of your project work in my inbox, if you will. So that's something to look at too if you haven't implemented collaborative work management. So this kind of gives you an idea of kind of how we look at overall reporting. As I mentioned before, we have some of our pre-built solutions. And one of those solutions, which I didn't highlight earlier, is a strategic plan. So for those organizations starting off implementing strategic planning, part of that strategic planning office or within the enterprise PMO, we have strategic plans that you can use and then distribute that out just like you might be doing today, but more manually. But that's something I'll highlight if I have time here in our demo. Next here, we have our overall portal for executives. We see CIOs, COOs using this on a daily basis to give that visibility as well as business unit leaders. So it's a key ability to kind of share that visibility, make sure that the daily conversations on what we're working on is going to drive the best value for the organization. We've also found that by executives having this visibility, they see then all of the things that have been requested, and they even see things that maybe were surprising to them. They're like, hey, we shouldn't really do that. Let's get one of our other more strategic initiatives in the hopper and start working on that. Then we've got ways to have an easy business case that you can easily route there. So that's a nice way of doing a business case. Here we have the project status report portal. So one pager here, PDF, PowerPoint. ServiceNow has a new solution now around the PowerPoint there. And they've just implemented a new version 1 of the status report. It's more of a document. I think they're looking at dashboards next. But these portals here can be used and provide that visibility across the organization, like we mentioned, without the license requirement there. And here's an example of a project charter. So just based upon timing here, I'm just going to go in here just quickly and show a couple of things here. I'm going to first come over here. We talked a little bit about strategic planning. So we have this overall solution here. By going into the system, creating a strategic plan, you'll have this overall online version that you can share. You can also then export this out to print or to PowerPoint. And so here's really going to be all the data that's in ServiceNow. You can link to this from ServiceNow as well. So if you had mission and vision, this example here is if you wanted to create a strategic plan just for AI for the organization. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the company-wide plan. It could be a functional-based strategic plan. So for AI, mission and vision here, what's our strategic priorities, i.e. our areas of focus that we want to have. Then we can come over here and look in each one of those areas of focus and understand what our goals are, as well as what are our targets. What do we want to accomplish currently? Then we can come over here and look at, okay, what's the overall progress based upon those initiatives, those demands, those projects. Then we can come over here to the next strategic priority, look at our different goals here around AI readiness, our roles and responsibilities, really getting AI into the organization. And then you've got the overall initiatives and progress. Same thing here. How about we manage the risks associated with AI? What are our goals? What are our metrics we want to track here? How do we track the initiatives? So you can use it in that fashion. We also have two ways of viewing it. One is kind of the landscape view you're seeing now, or if you want, you could actually then look at the portfolio view. And I logged out here. So basically, if you wanted a traditional PowerPoint, a PDF type view here, so I can basically have it in this view as well. So whichever view is easier to communicate with the organization, you can do that here using our strategic report plan portal. Next here, just to highlight, we were showing this other report portal here. This is the one where CIOs and COOs use this to communicate out to the organization. Doesn't require the license here. And so all the stakeholders can view it. You can filter, roll up and roll down the information here by portfolio, department, additional filters there. And I can see the overall roadmap here. We can look at your demand details. I can click into this here and I can see the business case here and details associated with that. On my projects, I can pull up here and I can look at the overall project charter as an example. And then over here, I can kind of going back to that strategic plan. Looking like I'm probably taking a little time here, but I wanted to show you some other post-implementation road mapping examples, because I'm assuming many of you might already have implemented SPM in some form or fashion. And so as a part of that, it's definitely something that we're offering to those attending today. It's an offering that we do have. We can do this very simply, have a couple of sessions, discovery sessions with you, and then we can provide you with a roadmap. And that could be something we can do for free, or if you want a more in-depth, right, we can do a 1 week or 2 week actual engagement. But we do a lot of just the 1 or 2 sessions and give you a roadmap. But next here, just to give you an example, say focusing on project delivery, post initial implementation, coming in here and doing a project charter type solution, so you can have that reporting and visibility. Adding more here around deliverables, maybe an MS Teams or Slack integration as needed, or today's world now entering in and using the collaborative work management, maybe moving in towards agile or hybrid from your traditional waterfall project delivery cycle methodology. Lessons learned. So this is a great solution we've done for customers using the knowledge base. So it's a great way so you can continually search and review previous lessons learned on projects to help the performance of new projects. So then we got the benefit plans. They might want to start estimating benefits associated with project investments, setting up additional KPIs for project delivery, doing some project stakeholder satisfaction surveys, start doing project benefit realization tracking. We see that as a journey. So you do some initial benefit realization reporting, and then as you get more mature, you can add more reporting on that over time. And then kind of a customer, say business unit delivery KPI dashboard, so kind of highlight all the value you're providing with your project delivery. And even start using maybe some benchmarking from ServiceNow as well. We look at it from a strategic planning perspective, from a roadmap perspective. Maybe we need to put together our overall scoring framework. Maybe we need to put together more of our portfolio management practices, start looking at doing some what-if scenario analysis, really start putting in our goals framework with strategic plans in here, maybe to assign some additional planning types, like epics as an example. Then setting up those planning types, setting up strategic plans and roadmaps, then going into some of that benefit realization from a portfolio perspective. So those are some of the examples here from a strategic planning roadmap. And then a resource and work management. We do see a collision a lot of times around resource and work management. So this is after you might have originally implemented some portions of resource management. So this is kind of an example from previous customers. Somebody is continuing to roll it out to other parts of the organization, integrate your governance processes, utilize capacity planning in your portfolio plans in the strategic planning workspace, start getting into maybe enhancements for non-project discretionary work, maybe start looking at how you're going to report on overall work, not just project work, but non-project work. And setting up some overall performance analytics around resource management. So just some examples of ongoing maturity items that you can implement. This one here is kind of looking at it from more from a product perspective. So might be other product modules or features that you haven't implemented, maybe the MS Teams or Slack, the collaborative work management I mentioned, maybe the portfolio management goals framework, the unified agile backlog, strategic planning workspace, maybe you're not using that yet. And then you got the virtual agent, the benchmarking, and actually they have some of the new AI capabilities, and those are coming out continually as well. So those can be some additional things you might want to look at from a overall product roadmap perspective. Then maybe you want to look at SPM Plus across the platform. So many of you probably already have ITSM, but there might be some other areas to include there that kind of relates to managing projects. Digital portfolio manager is a key one to kind of marry together ITSM and SPM. So you can start getting visibility there. Maybe moving into more of the integrated risk management, governance risk and compliance items. There's some nice tie-ins and plugins between the two solutions there. App portfolio management, now called enterprise architecture. A lot of synergies there, a lot of kind of basically just integrations out of the box with that capability. Maybe looking at field service management, work orders, tying that into projects, maybe doing customer service management projects as an example. So maybe going into procurement management. So just some ideas on where you might be going beyond just SPM. So in summary, as I mentioned before, feel free to schedule your SPM Roadmap Discovery Workshop. We can do a couple of those sessions to understand your as-is state, give you a recommended roadmap, and some short and near-term recommendations. We also include estimates on that as well, but we can do that for free as needed, or we can do a full-blown 1 week or 2 week engagement. All right, well, thanks everyone for attending today. Thanks so much for joining us on our session today. Love to get your feedback. If you want to send us a note on this is beneficial for you, or there's other topics you'd like to understand in the future, feel free to do that. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Have a great day.